My name's Christina Walker. I'm a co-producer on the season 8 of The Flash. A little bit about me. I did the Disney ABC writing program back in 2016 and have been very fortunate that that pretty much was the launch pad with which I've been able to kind of maneuver and strategize my way to where I currently find myself on Flash. Things that have helped me kind of along the way to get to where I currently am. You know, someone once asked me, like, are you ever too old, or, you know, is it too late to ever like start a career in writing? And I truly feel like if you can find a kernel from every job you've ever had or any life experience you've had and put that into your writing or apply that into getting to you to where you want to go, like, I feel like that's something I've been able to do successfully. And, you know, when I also had someone once ask me, like, what is your superpower? And I was just like, I'm not a superhero, so I don't have a superpower. So I'm not sure I really understand the question. And it took me a couple seasons to kind of like, I kept coming back to that question because I kind of started realizing, like, well, I do have a superpower, because people actually ask me to do this all the time. I'm very organized, and I'm very much a planner, and I'm very goal oriented. And in a world like television where time is money and things move really fast, if you can be organized, or if you can be a planner, if you can have kind of like a B, and C kind of strategy, and if A doesn't work, you go to B, and if B doesn't work, you go to C. If you can just kind of use those types of skills, and regardless of what it is, if you find a way to kind of like dovetail it into the career as a television writer, I promise you it will help you get to where you're trying to go faster. The first meeting you're probably ever going to sit down for is either a general or an agent or manager meeting, unless you're one of those special people who knows a showrunner, and I feel like you're much further along than some other folks. So, you know, when you're sitting down with an agent and manager, a lot of times we as writers are like, oh, I'm so thankful that you sat down with me. But you should also look at the situation as you are also interviewing them as being a representative of you and part of your team, as them interviewing you as the client. And, you know, one of the questions that I kind of picked up along I go to a lot of panels, I still do, but especially before I became like a working writer, I used to go to a slew of them. If it was free and I had time, I went. But one of the kernels I picked up from an actual agent on a panel is, you know, she articulated that one of the best questions she was ever asked is like, what was it about my writing that sparked your interest? And the kind of the note behind the note, or the question behind the question, is you're wanting to make sure they read your script and they loved a certain part that reflected who you are as a writer and why you love that script. You know, if they gloss over and are like, oh, I loved your characters you created, or they give you some generic answer, like, do a follow-up question, because you're wanting to make sure that they are going to help you pave a way for the career that you want to have. Like, if they're looking for an action writer, but you love to write soap, you need to find an agent or a manager who is going to help you be like the best soap writer you could possibly be. And it can be intimidating, and it can be a little scary to like be like, okay, I only got one agent manager meeting, and I feel like it's not a good fit, but I should just honestly say no. I know that's very scary, but say no, and know that it's going to save you some heartache along the way. And you are eventually going to find someone that's the right fit for you. This is a lesson it took me a while to learn, skip the steps that I had to stumble upon. And again, it's scary, but say no, because I promise you're going to find someone that's going to spark to your writing. As far as generals go, I am not naturally an extrovert. I'm naturally an introvert. And I kind of had to unlearn habits that I had kind of just naturally embraced along the way of life. And talking about myself to people that I didn't know was not a normal for me. So what I used to do for my generals is I would practice with friends, because then you're just telling a story to someone you know. And the more you tell a story, the easier it is to tell. It's almost like you go on autopilot of sorts. And I'm not saying like phone it in at all, but just get comfortable in sharing the stories that reflect who you are as a writer. And I promise you're going to get more adept at, like, I call it the tap dance, where you're tap dancing. And first, all you can do is tap dance. It's all you can do. But then the tap dance becomes actually okay. And then you can tap dance and juggle. And the analogy is kind of like, what you're wanting to do is, sometimes the person you're having the journal with will have their own ideas of like how they want to steer the conversation. And sometimes they're just going to sit down for me and be like, so tell me about yourself. And the tell me about yourself, like, you need to have an idea of what you want to tell them. And it should be something not that only that reflects you, but hopefully reflects something they have in the works, so that they can then think of you for that project. Because, you know, we're writers, we have lots of stories. It's up to you as the writer who is sitting across from the exec or whomever that you're having a journal with to kind of cultivate through the many stories that you have to tell. Because time goes by super fast in generals, I feel like. As far as like showrunner meetings, it's kind of similar in that you hopefully have read the pilot that you're being put up for the show, or are familiar with the show, in which case you can again cultivate the stories that you personally have experienced in your life that then lend itself to the characters or the stories that that show might delve into in the upcoming seasons, that so that you can then be like the perfect fit for that show. And pitch meetings, they have become so varied. I would just say when you go in for pitch meetings, just be prepared. Because I could sit here for a whole hour and talk about, especially with Zoom, I feel like Zoom has added a whole nother like sub layer of how the difference of pitching has become. But just be prepared, have thoughts past just the pilot and the first season. I was advised, like, have the first 3 seasons, at least brushstrokes for the second and third. And I think that will help you first and foremost in being ready for those types of meetings. So for outreach, I would say, when I first started off, I had a friend once who was a manager, honestly, tell me I needed to meet more writers. And it kind of dawned on me that, like, writers do hire and recommend writers. So if you don't know a lot of writers, I would give you that same advice: meet more writers. And I do think even in this time of COVID, there is a way to do that online. Like, panels are still happening, just like this one, where you can find writers. And usually there's a chat function. You know, what you want to do is try and meet more people that you can then, like, be part of your network. And your network is going to have people who are going to help you as a writer. And then you're also going to have people in your network who are going to help you along your career path. And it's up to you to distinguish who can do what. And some of those people are going to be your friends. Like, some of those people are just going to be your friends, and you're going to just spitball ideas with them. And that's kind of the role that they serve in your life, in your career. But how to best position yourself for outreach is to know kind of the buffer of the ask. So, like, if you've met someone at a mixer or a panel, or seen someone at, you know, first you just do the, hey, you had this really cool comment, I would love to pick your brain on XYZ that you just talked about. Great, pick the brain. I am a big fan of picking the brain, because I only have one, but as you can tell from just this short chat, I cultivate ideas and thoughts that other people have advised of me or have just said in passing and been like, that's a cool idea that I didn't think of as well. And picking the brain can, you know, picking someone else's brain, I feel like is super easy. Yes. Like, more than likely, if you ask another writer, like, hey, I just want to pick your brain on this thing that you talked about, or this idea that I have that I think you might have already gone around town and pitched, It's an easy yes. The next step would then be to ask to have someone read something of yours. And that kind of outreach takes time, and you also want to make sure the person that you're making the ask for has the time, because sometimes they just don't. And so sometimes I would say like the middle line between like asking someone to read the script and asking to pick the brain is at the end of that first brain picking session, be like, if you ever have the time, would it be okay for me to send you one of my scripts? Again, simple yes or no. And just like embrace whatever that answer is. I personally, it's really hard for me to ask for help. But once I learned that I could not, just seemed like I was never going to make that next step unless I got some help from outside of myself. And once I did that, it still took a while, but I was able to like start making steps one in front of the other in making the career that I currently have today. So again, it's baby steps, and it's also understanding the ask. And if someone reads your scripts and loves it, then all of a sudden they're now a fan. And depending on how it struck them, they might actually do something with it without you having to make the ask. But always kind of respect that other person's time and understand that if they say no, that's not a no forever. That friend that I talked about earlier, that was a manager, when he was like, you need to meet more writers. Like, he had read a script of mine, and I had asked him, like, is this like good enough to possibly have you be my rep? And he's like, I don't think you're there yet. And I respected that. He was being honest with me, and it wasn't an easy answer, but it was one I needed to hear, because it meant I needed to work harder on my craft. And honestly, like, he and I are still friends. And it's one of those things where, further down my career, like, he was like, maybe I should read some of your stuff. And I'm like, dude, I really value you as a friend. And, that outreach that I initially made, I think the fact that I wasn't discouraged by the no, I think stuck with him too. So again, know that a no right now does not mean a no forever, but respect the no. And if they say yes, oh my gosh, dude, like, do not wait. Do not wait. And if the script's not ready, that's okay. Send them an email saying like, hey man, or lady, thank you so much for honestly saying you're going to read my script. It's not quite ready yet, but as soon as it is, I will send it to you. And it's the act of the follow-up. Like, I used to work as an assistant. So like, following up is just something I had to do for so long for my job that I kind of put the assistant hat on my own head for myself. But don't miss that window, because I know there are several opportunities I missed because I was like, it's not good enough. And sometimes if you've been working on it for a while, you just got to take that leap and respect the no. If they're like, this isn't my cup of tea, and that's okay. That's where like writing, unfortunately, is subjective. And so not everyone's going to love your stuff, but it's up to you to find it. Like, it's your kind of like almost your job too, to find those champions and those cheerleaders that you're going to have, who can help you along the way on your career, and who are going to believe in you and know that you can like do the job because you have the chops to do it. I think one thing that I've learned is that I can always write myself out of it. Like, we are multifaceted people because we're drawn to characters. Well, it may be this one character or this one thing that whoever read the script, they didn't gel with it, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean you can't write something else that they're not going to love. That's still an opportunity. And if they're willing to share why they didn't gel with it, like, to me, that feedback is gold, because it's going to tell you more about them almost sometimes than your script. When I first was getting started, I was in post-production. I worked in post for many years, and post-production is on the opposite side usually of where the writers' offices are for television. And so I belong to a script coordinators group, and I started reaching out to people who are working on shows, who are script coordinators or writer assistants who are working on shows that I loved, or that I read the pilot and I was like, oh my God, I would love to work on that show. And I just started, again, asking for people to sit down so I could pick their brain or get advice. And I probably emailed like 40 people over like a 2-month period of time while I had downtime at my job. And of those 40 people, one person said yes. That one person also came from post-production. So I felt like his advice was the most valuable. So I was so glad he said yes. And this is where timing sometimes is everything. On a fluke, that same week, we were having coffee on Sunday, but that same week before, his show got an additional episodes, and he was doing the job of script coordinator and writer's assistant in one. And when we sat down for coffee and we started getting along, he was like, actually, we're looking for a writer's assistant because we got more episodes. So we actually need to hire someone. And I was like, pick me. And he's like, send me your work. And I did that night. And I had a meeting with the showrunner a couple days later. And I had a new job that following Monday. So if I had never put the word out to those people that I was looking for advice, and, that one person sat down and had coffee with me, and I had my script ready that was polished and ready for a showrunner to read, like, all those things have to happen. But I also was prepared for that sit down in case somehow he was like, I'd love to read something that you wrote. And it's, again, it's one of those things where it's like, that was the first writer's assistant job I ever got. And, I'm still friends with most of those writers. That showrunner, I still like, he's one of the best showrunners I've ever had. I was able to learn so much on that one job, but it's like, had I not done all this other stuff to get that sit down, I'm not sure if I'd be here sitting with you today. It was a big meeting for me, but I was prepared. So to go back to what I was saying, I'm an organizer and I'm a planner. And the more prepared I can be, I feel like the more calm and zen I am in a meeting. For the tap dance, you definitely want to do your own research on who it is you're sitting down from. If they grew up in the same hometown as you, you should definitely know that before you sit down and they tell you a little about yourself and you're like, oh, I grew up there too. You should know that already. Because you can lead with that. I mean, this is the one thing where I do miss not going to offices, is sometimes stuff isn't online. And so you can't find out. But like, I remember I went to this one person's office, and my dad's a huge Steelers fan. So I sat down and saw a football sign with the Steelers emblem. I'm like, oh my gosh, my dad's a huge Steelers fan. I was like, which means I'm a huge Steelers fan. Like, I have my terrible towel in my, bookshelf right now as we speak. And we just talked about football for the whole meeting. So even if you're prepared to talk about one thing, also be prepared to like chuck that out the window if the opportunity presents itself to actually make a connection with someone. Because then all of a sudden, you're not just the writer that wrote this thing, you're the writer from Pittsburgh who's a huge Steelers fan who wrote this thing. And then they're painting you with a much more specific paintbrush where they'll probably remember you, versus like, oh, did I have a writer with that meeting with that person? I don't quite remember, because they're reading a lot. When you're sitting down with these meetings, they are reading a lot of scripts. So other things you can do to prepare. I, always try and get to meetings like 5 minutes ahead of time, or 2 minutes. Now it's on Zoom. When I used to go out in person, it was always 10 minutes ahead, because you never want to be late to a meeting. It does still happen. And when you do, like, the only thing I can say is like, kind of try and let it go. I can sometimes even be in my own head where I'm like cursing myself, like I didn't plan this better enough, but you just kind of have to like get on there and just let it go. If you have a bad morning, like try and, when I used to drive a lot, I had like a song I would like listen to the radio right before I leave my car, just to kind of like put me in the mood for this, like nailing and killing the meeting. So whatever works for you, whether you want to meditate for a few minutes before the meeting, I have 2 cats. I'm not sure if you've seen them. I sometimes snuggle my cats if I've had a bad morning, get a little snuggle love. And that always puts me in a better mood. Like, go for a walk, do whatever you need to do to clear your head, to kind of like put your like game hat on to go into that meeting and like kill it. Other things you can do is for prep. If they cover certain shows, be familiar with the shows. You don't have to be familiar with all of them, but be prepared to talk about at least one or two. If they, used to be at a different company and that's where they did a show that you loved, don't be afraid to bring that up. Like, it shows that you've done your homework. And I feel like no one hates hearing how something that they worked on you loved, even if they're no longer with that company. I feel like we all want to hear positive, like that a show affected someone positively. Like, I have writer friends that work on shows that I love. I regularly, if they write an episode that made me cry or feel something, I always send that note, because we as writers, like, we're in this bubble. We know what's on, out there in the comments section. But when another person that or even casually know, like, loved what you wrote, I think it matters to hear that. You want to hear that the work that you've written on, like, actually mattered to somebody in a positive way. And, the only thing I can say is, prior to prepping for the meeting, I also always like to, when I, now that I have reps, get an email address before you leave the meeting. I know we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but like, I used to be horrible with follow-up. I am much better now at follow-up, because, if you rely on your reps to always follow up with the execs in the meetings that you have, if you leave those reps, you then have lost the connection to those people that you might have actually gelled with. Like the lady that, the person that was a Steelers fan, like, I had their email address. So I was able to maintain that relationship. I wasn't relying on my representatives to maintain that relationship for me. Like, that's on you as the writer of kind of the steerer of your own career, to make sure that those relationships, especially the ones where you really feel like you bonded with a person, like, that you keep those going. I mean, what really helps me, again, because I like to be prepared, is to practice. And I am one of those people, like, I've done the whole, like, record myself and listen. I just can't stand my voice, if that makes any sense. But I have practiced with friends, and having them give you feedback of, oh, I would spend more time talking about this, or have you ever thought of like switching this stuff around? And just, I think, again, the more you practice, the more you can kind of like tap dance on the fly and kind of ad lib and like dovetail and weave and bob and weave, like, because the person that you're sitting across from, like, they may ask you to like, tell me about yourself, or they may come in with I heard about this about you. Like, is that true? Or can we talk about, like, my dad was in the military for 23 years. So it's like, I volunteer with the military vets. I have lots of ways to weave that story, because it's so much about who I am and what I write and what I'm drawn to, that I can weave that into my narrative a multitude of different ways, because it's a part of my, personal story that I want to share, so that people, again, remember that's part of who I am and why I write what I write. Don't go in not having your own questions. I guess we might, like, don't just expect to like show up and be like, okay, I'm here for you. Like, go in with an agenda. So I guess this is another like quasi do, honestly, is like, do you have questions to ask them? And this kind of falls under the, do your research as far as your prep. I always like to have at least 2 questions to ask them, whether it's specific about a project or specifically about the production company or the studio or the network, like whoever you're sitting across from. Like, I at least have like a question or 2 to ask. Again, the whole show up early, still try. I always do that for Zoom. I feel like it's much easier for Zoom, but when we go back to like possibly meeting in person, like, early, have kind of your own idea of where you, like, I always come with like a few points that I want to make sure I convey about myself during the meeting, because again, you're having a conversation with someone, so you want it to be fluid. if you don't accomplish like all three, that's fine. Like, again, have like at least that one or two that you're like, oh, I need to make sure that they know these two things about me. Cause again, the time, usually it's like most general meetings or even meetings with agents and managers, like they usually go like at least 30 minutes, somewhere around there. Like, I feel like if a meeting lasts longer than 30 minutes, great. If it lasts less than 30 minutes, it doesn't mean anything. I've had like a meeting where it lasts like literally like 20 and I was like, I guess it didn't. Like my average is about 30 minutes. And like my agents later were like, she loved you. And I was like, okay. And so it's just like, this is where I think like we are still kind of in our own head, but you know, trying to have a conversation. Like, I feel like that's the goal I always try and do. So, you know, I've, you know, recently moved. So I remember one meeting I talked about moving, like me and the other person had just moved too. So it's like, we talked about moving and painting and apartment stuff, like for, I don't know, almost the whole meeting. I remember we got to the point and they were like, I bet you probably want to know a little bit more about my company. I was like, that would be great. You know, but I kind of always let them steer at that point if you're having a good conversation, because it's like, why not? You can always have another meeting if you're running out of time, which does happen. You know, I'm a talker too. Again, I used to be an introvert. Now that I'm an extrovert, I'm a talker. I'm a big talker. I can talk. I've had meetings that lasted over an hour and a half. And it's like, it flies by because you feel like you're talking with a friend. And it's like, you know, those are the people that I almost follow up with at least a handful of times every year, just because it's like, they're now like friends. And, you know, once you're in that meeting, it's hard because the nerves are there. Certain meetings I still get nervous over compared to others. It just depends on what I'm going in there for. Like, you know, I always try and say, like, you know, again, with the whole planning and research, like have an objective. You know, if they have this one project that you're really excited about, like have questions about that project. Cause it's like, you have the person there, like, you know, sometimes they're like, I signed an NDA and can't tell you anything about it. And it's like, that's okay. But you let them know you're aware of it and you're excited about it. And so like, if they're telling you like, ask me about it in 2 months, like we have reminders on our computer, on our phone, like you can set that reminder as soon as you leave that meeting. And then it gives you the perfect opportunity to follow up with them in a month or two. And you're not asking for anything other than like, remember me? Remember we talked about this really cool thing? You said you couldn't talk about it at the time. Like, can you talk about it now? And it just shows how excited you are about this project that they have working on. And I feel like excitement and passion about a project, like it shows that you're not phoning it in, like you're being genuine and authentic. And I feel like when you are excited genuinely about a project, like it's contagious and people want to work with those types of people. Be yourself is kind of, and if you like, again, like I feel like I'm very much myself, but it took me a while to be myself in front of strangers. I try not to think of them as strangers. I try and think of them as people that are possible friends on this journey that is the entertainment industry and being a TV writer. I will say my virtual meetings are usually shorter. I have not had an hour and a half virtual meeting. So, you know, it is one of those things where it's like the whole, I'm a big hugger too. So it's like, I knew I was having a good meeting when I got a hug as I was leaving and I was like, yay. I feel like it is harder to tell with virtual meetings, but again, try not to let that get in your head, you know, like not being able to tell whether it was a good meeting or bad meeting. Like if you did your job and you got your things across about yourself that you wanted to, then I feel like that's a good meeting. The whole follow-up, like definitely follow up with a thank you email. And especially if you, again, like talked about something that you were super excited about, like that follow-up email is a great place to then like reiterate like how much you're excited about XYZ project. I also read the trades pretty religiously. And, you know, if you see that person or their company in the trades and it's like an announcement of sorts, it's another way you can kind of like get back on their radar. And it's, you know, it's hard. It's a lot of work to like stay on top of everything. So like sometimes stuff falls through the cracks and like I remember I missed sending someone an email when because I go back to the trades sometimes and search people before I send an email and be like, oh my gosh, I missed this announcement. I still say the congratulations, like somehow I missed this, because it happens. Like, if you go a week without reading because you're busy moving or covering set or what have you, or, have a life thing, I feel like everyone's like, oh, hey, thanks for the congrats. Like no one's going to be like, oh my gosh, how dare you not email me 3 months ago when this announcement hit the trades. Try and be yourself, try and be passionate and excited about at least one project they have either on the books or in development. If you aren't able to find that information out, just see what you can find out, and go from there. So it depends on the person, like how well you know that person. Usually after the thank you, I usually wait a couple months, if not 6 months, and sometimes even more than that, because the last thing you want to do is send an email to someone and they are slammed. And so your kind note gets lost in the slog of emails, or they're waiting for an email and yours pops up and they're like, I don't have time to read that. And either they accidentally delete it or they delete it on purpose because they're like, I don't have time to read that. Like I told the person I would be busy for like the next year, which I've had that happen too, where they're like, I'm going to be slammed for like the next year. And I'm like, again, set a reminder, like email this person in a year. And it sounds nuts, but that's how I kind of like keep things straight. Like I have so many reminders on my calendar. And then I also have a grid that I created so that I can kind of remember where and when I met everybody, because execs move around and you can't put that all on your calendar. So the grid I created just kind of helps me like, oh, this person used to be at XYZ company. And it's kind of like just an info sheet of who, where they are, where they were, what they've worked on, so that I can just keep it all in one place. But that's, I also have it like color coded. So it's like, if I need to meet or reach out to someone, like in the month of November, it's a certain color. For the month of December, it's a different color. And then I can go through at any time and be like, oh, here's all the people I should reach out for in December. And if someone, I remember reading like, oh, they're on this show and it's super crazy, I change the color. I'm like, I'm not going to contact them now. I'll contact them in like 3 months. Because then you're not adding to it. Then you're respecting like the fact that they're busy and you want to get a response. So you just have to kind of like try and get as much information from the tea leaves out there in the world that exist. And if they don't respond in a month or two, like just know that they're busy. And it could have gotten deleted. I've had someone honestly respond to an email a year after I sent it, being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it's just like, no worries. Like try not to take it personally. It's hard, but try not to take it personally, because it doesn't help you. And accidents happen, emails get deleted. Again, back in the time of when we used to meet in person, it was one of those things where it's like, you would regularly cross paths with someone at the movie theater or at a guild event or at a screening of sorts. And then it's like, hey, we should grab drinks. Absolutely. And then all of a sudden you grab drinks and you're almost more glad that you didn't catch up over email, because now you have a ton of stuff to talk about. But the timing of sorts, it's tricky because you don't always know when someone's busy, but you sometimes can figure it out between, what's online, what projects they're working on. You can kind of like, I always try and, if someone's like a studio or a network, I try and get them around the holidays. And I almost have like a whole slew of people I email the first couple weeks of January, because then you can be like, hey, Happy New Year. Can you believe it's blah, blah, blah. And 9 times out of 10, everyone's like, that first week, don't do that week. Second week, don't do that. That third week of January, people are usually caught up from work and they usually then have a moment. And for people that are working in the studio and the network, like it's right before pilot season gets in the full swing. So they have like kind of a window. And you start learning the tap dance the more you read the trades, start understanding like the cyclical nature of television. I feel like this is where like Apple, Amazon, like all the streamers and some cable, like it you almost are guessing unless you, again, you know, I mean, here's the thing. If you know someone that works on one of their shows, like ask the friend, like, hey, when's a good time to like, I know you, like, how busy are you guys? Like, when are you done? Like, the best time to email someone is like once they've wrapped on a show. Cause then they're on hiatus. Like usually, hopefully they're on like some mini break of sorts. So like you know, maybe they're working on development, but I do feel like you have a little bit more time when you're on hiatus versus when you're actually on a show. But it's tricky. I mean, I do feel like there's a world where you can turn it around in the follow up, and then you know if they have a project you would die to work on. Like I have a friend who's like, I would die to work on a Marvel movie, or I would die to work in like a Lucasfilm, like anything Star Wars. And it's like if you kind of bomb that meeting, it's like again, it's not a no forever. It's just no for right now. Like that's how I try and go into those. So it's like, okay, so this meeting didn't go well. You know, send an email or two over the next year, and then hopefully you can try and schedule another meeting next year. If you have reps, this is a great little powwow moment to have with your reps, whether it's an agent or a manager. Like this is when you're like, I really want to try and do this again. Like when is too soon? Because here's the thing, you don't know. There's so much other stuff going on that has nothing to do with you. And so it 9 times out of 10, again, it's not you, it's something else. It sucks when you have a meeting or you feel like you bombed a meeting. Try not to let it get you down. I know that's hard to do, but try and take it as a learning experience. Like I always try and take something positive, even from the negative. And the try in that sentence is the key word. Cause sometimes you're just like, you know, let yourself live in the moment, but then like try and be like, what should I have done different? Or what could I have done differently to steer this meeting from what I felt was like a not a good meeting to a better meeting or a great meeting. Like sometimes, you know, I compare writing to cooking, and I feel like meetings are the same way. Like sometimes you remember, oh, that extra teaspoon of salt, like that kind of ruined the dish. And you're like, next time I make the dish, I'm not adding that teaspoon of salt. Like I'm just going to do a dash. And, you know, hopefully you'll get that next opportunity to try again. And people bounce around all the time. So again, like, I feel like execs right now in particular are bouncing around more than I ever can recall them moving from like point A to point B. Like I had a meeting this morning. When I first tried to set this meeting 3 months ago, the person was at a whole different company. Still had the meeting, but like the person has been there for like a month, you know, and that just goes to show like, hey, if you bombed with that person at that place, like perhaps they're on their way out. And again, which means again, the meeting had nothing to do with you. It had to do with the fact that they're planning on transitioning out of the company, in which case there's going to be a new person there. You need to meet that new person. I feel like I'm using a lot of sports analogies today, but it's like play to your strengths. You know, if you are not one of those people that is great in a room, like how can you be better in a room? Like I had one friend who was like, you know, they knew they were always uncomfortable in meetings. And so someone recommended they take an improv class. And I took improv classes years ago when I did theater. I feel like that has somehow helped me, I think. And, you know, whatever you need to do to try and like loosen yourself up to like really shine. And, you know, for me, again, this is where like organizing and planning, like having preparation, reading stuff, going into the meeting, feeling fully prepared, even if you wind up using none of it, like that's what makes me feel confident going into that meeting. So I'm okay doing the extra homework because I think it allows for me to do better with the improving and the dancing and the cooking that you're going to do in the meeting. Strategy is tricky because it's different for, I feel like, each situation. But, you know, talk it out with your friends and see what has worked for someone else. I feel like we are still living in this time where it's like, normally at the guild, like you hear from this person, oh, this is how this person got that new manager or agent. Oh, this is how this person landed that job. Oh, this is how this person did this, or this person did that. You know, look at the people who have the kind of careers that you want to emulate, and how did they get there? Who helped them along the way? What jobs did they take and what jobs did they turn down? Like, can you find that information out? And again, like, I am a big fan of like people coming together and collaborating, because again, I'm a TV writer, so that's what we do. You know, share your ideas. Like, hey, I'm trying this and I'm hitting a brick wall. What do you think? Because someone else might be like, just do a tiny little shimmy on what you're doing, and that might open the door and be like the missing ingredient that you didn't even realize you were missing. I do look forward to the time when we can all sit together and share ideas. I feel like it just flows more fluid. But until that time, you know, that's just where it's like, find writers on Twitter or on Instagram. I personally have had, I'm one of those people that's like sending an email or on Instagram or Twitter and then having someone respond. Like, I have never tried that. I have had friends who've had amazing success. I do feel like it's a talent that I do not possess. If you're one of those people that like are social media, like, and you can go on there and just like are quick and funny and can be all that in one message and convey the idea that you're trying to get across, and you've had success, like, keep doing that. I applaud you. I don't know how that works. Like, I have Twitter and I have Instagram, but I don't know how you make that next step. But I have friends who have done it, and I, again, applaud them. I do feel like it's like being able to write a joke and have everyone laugh at it. Like, don't have, I'm a drama writer. I can write a dramatic scene. You know, that is my safe, happy place. So everyone, thank you so much for joining in our little chat. I hope you've picked up at least a kernel or two of stuff that you can take with you on your journey. Try to smile, turn a frown upside down. I'm a very positive person, because it's just like, life is too short, man. And again, thank you for joining, and good luck.